So hello there. I'm here just developing this little game I have here on Unity, and I figure why not give a little tour of about it, I guess. Uh, yeah. So, uh, to give context, this game started off as an egg catching game where you had like a bucket and you caught eggs that fell from the sky, and I took that and I reconfigured it into a game where you shoot aliens in space. So, um, I guess first we'll just go ahead and do a test run. So, here we are. An alien hit me. Oh no. But I can hit in the back. Aha! This laser thing I made. So to be clear, I didn't make these assets. I just found them on the Unity store for free, and I used them for my own purposes. Yep. I can shoot. I can strafe around in this ship. The input isn't all that. I don't quite love the input because like I'm pressing forward right now, and I kind of like go sideways for some reason. In any case, I'm losing a lot of health, not doing very well at all, and I exploded. So that's cool. I can restart and stuff, and it'll restart the game. It's pretty neat. I like it. For like, this is the first project in Unity, basically. So I think it's a success. Anyways, so I can go ahead and I guess go through the code. If you're just interested in seeing the flashy bits, well, here it is. But if you're interested in looking at the code, you can keep watching. Let me just fucking die. Boom. Dead. Okay. So let's look at these scripts. I'm not going to open Visual Studio because that has personal information. So we'll just stick with this. So here, this is my alien script. So this happens inside alien objects, those little dragon things. Basically, it's very simple. When they fall out, like so they spawn in a circle. We'll look at the spawner script in a moment. But outside of that spawner circle, there's also basically not much of a, it's actually a box more than a radius. But there's a for lack of a better term, like box, I'll just call it a radius. Outside this radius of 20, they're going to get destroyed. That's basically it. It's just housekeeping, so I don't spawn a million game objects. It just cleans them up for me. The player system here, this call actually is an artifact from when I was doing a different method of scoring. That is, like, initially you just dodge the aliens and you get points when they're destroyed, but now I have a laser, so that's cool. Speaking of laser, here's the laser script, and this is just to kind of destroy aliens when on impact. So it'll destroy the laser as well as the alien, and it'll give me, the player, points for it. So like going top to the bottom, I guess. Update. It also has the same thing where if it falls out of the radius, the laser will get destroyed again to clean up. And then on trigger enter, this function here, that just if it collides with an enemy, it'll kill it and give me points. That's basically it. It's very simple here. So now we're getting a bit complicated here in this player system. So the player system is its own object, just in the game. It's not attached to anything except for its own object. But let's just look at the script. So here at the start of the game, we just instantiate the score, the ship's health, and a game over flag. And we also want to look for the spawner for a reason. In the update, It's pretty simple. You just check if the game is over or not. If the game is over, I go ahead and destroy everything on the board, and I set game over to true. And when game over is true, I can basically reload the game by pressing R. And on GUI is just it's a conditional thing where, like, if the game's over, I'll just display that the game is over as well as my current score, and generally I will instead have the score and my HP. Again, not very complicated, but we're starting to like get a little longer here. Now is the most complicated script I have on this game, the ship script. So the awake function is straightforward. It's just basically the constructor of this thing. The update method is a lot more interesting. So on game over, of course, I'm gonna just destroy the ship. We'll come back to that. Actually, no. So on, like, it'll call the ship's destroy function, and that just destroys the ship, but it also instantiates that explosion you saw. So I have a prefab fabrication of an explosion animation that I also got from the Unity store. And basically I just plop it right on there as soon as the ship is destroyed. So that's fun. But if the game's not over, we do all this stuff. And this stuff is kind of more complicated. So here I declare three input things. The first one is a vector, where honestly I should just call floats and then vectors. That'd probably be a lot more clear. But this is just how my stream of consciousness coding went. But basically, this rotation input is to kind of change how I guess it's called the yaw, like how the ship turns. That's what that's for. So you saw, like, the ship turns on itself, and I can press forward to push it forward, which is what the vertical input is for. In the middle here we have the horizontal input, which I made. So, like, the ship does move left to right a little bit. That's why, like, so you can see here, in the vectors, I multiply the, oh, that's a mistake here. They both should be 5 rather than 25. But basically, the idea is you can move a little bit to your right and left to kind of adjust for the insane speed at which the force vector takes you. But it doesn't quite work as well. Like, the movement in this game is kind of difficult. It might be better on a gamepad. I haven't tried it. In any case, after that, I want to look at the horizontal input and see if it's greater than or equal to greater than or lesser than 0, not 0. I don't want it to be 0, because if it's 0, I basically don't want to do anything with the horizontal input. But if it's anything but 0, I add a force correlating to that direction. So if it's positive, then it adds a force to the right, and if it's negative, it adds a force to the left. And again, that is to correct. This is an attempt to correct the, frankly, very what's the word? Chaotic movement I have going on here. So that's what that's for. Vertical input, that one's pretty straightforward. It just adds a force going forward in the forward-facing direct vector, basically equivalent to this forward force vector here I have going on. So it just adds a force in that direction, and it sets the drag to 0. By the way, the drag getting set to 0 here in both of these cases is important, because drag basically slows it down to a stop, and I do something really cheeky here afterwards. So if vertical input is lesser than 0, that's basically when I press the down arrow key. I increase the drag incrementally so that it comes to a stop. This is another way to give the user more control, give me more control over where the ship is moving, but it still doesn't work very well. It's not very intuitive. I would like to improve this thing, but I'm not sure how far I'll get more than I have already. And the transform rotate is simply like it's Unity's rotation function instead of like these, which have a bit more nuance to them. Unity just has a rotate function that I use to do that. And here is my fire laser code. So basically I press the spacebar, a laser gets created, and I send it flying in the forward vector. It's very simple. It has an impulse force, and that means it'll only apply force once to that object, and that object is now moving at a constant velocity, as opposed to up here where these are acceleration vectors or acceleration forces. So they'll get as I'm holding down the button, it'll get faster and faster rather than a sudden burst of movement. And here, this restricts the playing field basically, so like that your ship doesn't go flying off screen and you don't know where it is. That's all it is really. It is a box in which I keep your ship because I don't want you flying off. There's probably more elegant ways to handle this, but that's how I choose to handle it. And so that's most of the nitty-gritty stuff. Down here is just a collision event where if you collide with an enemy, the enemy will be destroyed because they're weaker than you, of course, and you'll lose some HP. And of course, when your HP is 0, which is tracked by the player system over here, when HP is 0, it'll it's less than or equal to 0 rather. It'll trigger game over. So that'll trigger the ship's destroy event, so on and so forth. And lastly, the on destroy event. We talked about that actually already. It just creates an explosion prefab when the ship is destroyed. It's cool. By the way, I think I might have glossed over this, but yeah, when I click R, it basically resets the scene, and when the scene is reset, a new ship is spawned. All the game's variables are reset. You get the gist. Lastly is the spawner script. This one's kind of neat too. Basically, the spawning is on a timer based on the actual game time. So I have it set to time is equal to time.timesense level load, because Unity has a few time functions that basically count the seconds passing as a float. But I'm using timesense level load because if I use time.time, which is like the default one basically, it won't reset after I press reload on R. So that'll make all of those guys, all of the aliens, they'll just spawn very rapidly because their spawn is based on time. The longer the game goes, the more they'll spawn and the faster they'll spawn. So with this, every time I reload the game from having died, it'll reset the time to timesense level load, which will be a 0, And then this if statement is just it's to trigger the spawn. So if next spawn time is less than time, that is if the time allocated for the next spawn it has passed, this will trigger. And also and spawning. That the spawning is a variable I use for when it's game over. I set spawning to false, so this doesn't trigger. And then it does some math, and out of that math comes the spawn rate and of course the actual spawning. So in order to spawn the creatures radially, I had to do some good old trigonometry. I had to kind of figure that out a little bit. So what I did here is I basically here's the degrees in which I am going to spawn them. Random range from 0 to 360 is pretty obvious. It's a circle. And then the angle at which they are at is a very simple conversion from degrees to radians, because I need to, in order to do the trigonomic functions, I need this to be in radians. So I basically convert it to radians with this this line here, and then I get the x position and the y position based on cosine and sine respectively. And then I use that data to create a spawn position, and then I create one of those aliens using that spawn position. And I call this variable egg because that is also an artifact from when this was an egg game, and I just never changed it because why bother, right? Even though I changed everything else, you know, whatever. After that, it's I just want to try to make sure that the alien is facing the right way and is going the right way. So first off, this offset is very useful. It basically makes without this offset, all of the aliens will go towards the center exactly. So that offset allows it to veer off of the center, making it a bit more challenging to dodge them. And it makes their paths more random and less predictable. And so the look at function is just to tell them to look at the center with that offset. So it's giving them the direction to look at, and that's important because I need that force to go forward, because of how Unity's logic interprets how Unity requires you to add force. Add force requires you to have a direction, basically, and using forward, I can easily know what direction the guys are facing. And the reason I'm playing with negatives here is because the model itself, the forward is actually backwards, so I have a negative here in order to make the forward go backwards, essentially. As you saw, though, it works out. They go forwards, and that's basically it. I just kind of wanted to do this for no reason in particular. I'm doing this, which, I guess kind of explains what I'm doing by definition. Yeah, goodbye.